The government has moved in force against the radical right. The government says members of white supremacist groups have been plotting an armed revolution. And in an extraordinary nationwide sweep, agents moved in today and picked them up. Here's ABC's Mark Potter.
The FBI arrest sweep took place early this morning throughout the country. In Fort Smith, Arkansas. In Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Agents there arrested 68-year-old Richard Butler, head of the white supremacist group Aryan Nations. Near Detroit, another leader was arrested, Robert Miles, head of the racist Mountain Church of Jesus Christ. 10 of the 15 people indicted today are accused of plotting to overthrow the U.S. government through a variety of crimes.
Robberies, counterfeiting, assassinations of federal officials, assassination of ethnic groups, and bombings, destruction of utilities, pollution of water supplies.
Blood. Also indicted but still being sought is Louis Beam, an Aryan Nations ambassador-at-large, who in the past devised a racist computer network and gave military training to his followers.
Maximum violence upon them. Everybody in there, they mustn't have a chance to do anything but one thing: die.
In Denver today, 3 members of a racial terrorist group, The Order, were also indicted, along with another person, for the machine gun assassination of radio talk show host Alan Berg, who spoke out against the white supremacists.
While the indictments today name several different racist groups, authorities claim they often worked together and had joint memberships, a common racist religion, and the same supremacist goals. Also, many of their activities allegedly were financed by proceeds from the same crimes.
Authorities say money stolen during West Coast armored car robberies in 1984 was distributed to several supremacist groups. Also, that some defendants plotted to kill federal judge Franklin Waters and FBI agent Jack Knox in Fort Smith. Many believe today's indictments will seriously damage the already dwindling white supremacist movement. Mark Potter, ABC News, Fort Smith, Arkansas.
A 3-year federal investigation of white supremacy groups in this country today resulted in indictments against 15 key members. Some were charged in connection with the murder of Jewish talk show host Alan Berg 3 years ago in Denver. Other charges included planning to murder a judge and plotting to overthrow the government. NBC's Roger O'Neill has more.
Called Operation Clean Sweep by some, the Justice Department says today's arrest wipe out the white supremacist group known as the Aryan Nations, with all of its leaders either in jail or headed that way. The U.S. Attorney in Denver said today's action sends a message.
The message is that any radical group that uses violence to achieve their ends will be dealt with by the Department of Justice.
The government says the violence included murder, bank and armored car robberies, plotting to kill this man, federal judge Franklin Waters of Arkansas, and the ultimate overthrow of the U.S. government. The white supremacists belonged to various groups, the Aryan Nation, the Order, the Ku Klux Klan, and were, according to officials, anti-black, anti-Jewish, anti-government. David Lane, Bruce Carroll Pierce, Richard Scutari, and Gene Craig were charged with violating the civil rights of radio talk show host Alan Berg because he was Jewish. There is no federal murder charge. At KOA Radio in Denver, where Berg worked, there was relief from his producer, Annette White.
Until there were charges brought in this case, those guys got the feeling that they'd gotten away with murder.
8 of the 15 indicted are already in jail, convicted of various crimes. 4 were arrested today. 3 men are still at large, believed to be somewhere in Arkansas.
FBI Little Rock, suspects considered armed and dangerous.
Despite the government's view that today's arrest will eliminate the most dangerous of the suspected white supremacists, they still worry about sympathizers in various parts of the country. Roger O'Neill, NBC News, Denver.
Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News. Bob Schieffer sitting in tonight for Dan Rather. The Justice Department announced a series of indictments tonight against a group of white supremacist organizations apparently bent on taking over the government by assassinating government officials and judges. Rita Braver has our report.
Dates.
The indictment charges these individuals conspired to overthrow the United States government by force and violence and by armed revolution.
Arrested, Robert Miles, leader of the Mountain Church, Cohocton, Michigan. Richard Butler, head of the Aryan Nation Church, Hayden Lake, Idaho. Still at large, Louis Beam, Dallas-based national ambassador of the Aryan Nation. 8 others are in custody. upon them. The case grew out of a series of earlier prosecutions, including one here in Fort Smith, Arkansas. After a siege at the encampment of the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, the government arrested and convicted members on weapons and racketeering charges. In Seattle, members of the Order were convicted of murder, arson, counterfeiting, and armed robbery. Prosecutors and the FBI were convinced that these and other neo-Nazi group actions were linked, and that they'd nabbed mostly foot soldiers, rather than movement godfathers who operated much as the Mafia's commission did.
And I think that there is a comparison here, that you've got leaders of these groups planning, strategizing, and encouraging their followers to carry them out, and they should be held accountable as well.
The government says the scheme was hatched at a 1983 Congress of groups at Butler's Hayden Lake, Idaho church. CBS News has obtained a tape of Louis Beam's speech there.
Unleash that bullet and let it strike the enemy's body.
Experts say it was decided that Beam and others would open a violent underground, committing robberies like this $3.6 million Brinks truck heist to finance a neo-Nazi nation. Meanwhile, Butler and Miles took a public stance of nonviolence.
The above-ground phase has to deny the violence while the underground activity carries it on.
Today, not only this indictment, but other federal charges were unveiled against other movement members who allegedly conspired to murder Jewish radio talk show host Alan Berg.
The larger message is that these type of radical groups that use violence to achieve whatever ends they think they should achieve are going to be dealt with severely by the Department of Justice.
Still, Butler, who speculated on his own indictment several weeks ago, says the battle will continue.
The new leaders that jump in, younger leaders, more aggressive.
The government is taking the threat seriously. Officials say the white supremacy investigation continues. Rita Braver, CBS News, Fort Smith, Arkansas.